Alrighty, kiddo. So hopefully you were able to view the videos on sections 2.1 and 2.2 with inductive reasoning and logic. And as a recap with the logic, remember we had a statement, which is just a sentence that can be shown as true or false, right? We can assign a truth value to the statement. So if I say the sun is shining and the sun is shining, then I would assign a truth value of t, right? Truth value, okay? And then we learned how we could negate a statement by saying, if we have a statement, let's say P, okay, the sun is shining, and symbolically if we want to negate it, we go like this, not P, or we write the sun is not shining, right? Okay. And by the way, hopefully you've memorized by now that, for a negation, you have two choices. The statement that we write or that we see or that we make can either be true or false, right? There's two possibilities. It's either going to be true or it's going to be false. So if we think of the statement P and then the statement not P, if P is true, then negating it makes it false. And if P is false, then negating it makes it true. And this would be the little truth table for negation. Then we talked about putting sentences together or statements together by using the word and or. So if we use the word and, it's a conjunction, and if we use the word or, it's a disjunction, right? So a conjunction uses the word and is denoted by this little caret here in mathematics. So that's and or is denoted by a little V-shaped symbol, right? And we learned that with a conjunction, the only time a conjunction P and Q are true is if both statements are true, all right? So, I could say P. Oh, something simple. I am sick. And Q, I will get better. So I've written two statements, P and Q, okay? And I could say, what's P and Q? Well, P and Q is I am sick and I will get better. So for right now, anyway, this statement is true. And what I'm hoping, maybe I wouldn't get better, but I hope I will. The doctor said I will. So I will get better, then that's also true. And since both statements are true, then I assign a truth value to the whole conjunction as true. Okay, so this is true because both statements are true. If this was false and that is true, then this would be false. If this was false and that was false, that would be false, okay? And with the disjunction, the only time, okay, so the disjunction, denoted by the word or, right? We use the word or this little V symbol. The only time it's false is if both statements are false, okay? So the only time a disjunction is false is if P is false and Q is false. Otherwise, no matter what combination you have, it's going to be true. So, if this is true and that's true, then for disjunction, so if I say, let me just write it out. If I say P or Q, okay, meaning I am sick or I will get better, one or the other or both. So if P is true and Q is true, then the whole thing is true. If I am not sick, well, I shouldn't say that. I am sick is false and I will get better is false. Then because they're both false, the whole thing is false. If I am sick but I will not get better, then when I say I am sick or I will get better, that makes it true, and so forth, okay? So you have those little truth tables on the top of page 99 in your book, right? Now we're going to construct more elaborate truth tables, which I didn't want to get into last time because I just felt like it was too much. But they're really, really easy and they're really, really fun. So suppose I want to construct the truth table. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the statements represent. Sorry about the dog. I'm not going to tell you what the statements represent because it doesn't matter, all right? This works regardless of the statement. But I might say, let's see. I might say write a truth table for P and Q. Okay, even if we use those two statements up there, it's fine. P and Q. So what you do is you write down a column for P and a column for Q. And then since nothing else is going on, there's no negations or anything else, then the last thing is what would P and Q's truth table be? So again, P could be true and Q could be true. P could be true and Q could be false. P could be false and Q could be true, or they might both be false. So what I always tell the students to do when you're constructing a truth table is write out your letters, okay, and then write out the final conjunction or disjunction, compound statement. And you know, I always tell the kids to fill it in this way, that way you don't miss one. Do true, true, false, false for the first column, and then true, false for the second column, and then that'll cover all possible combinations. So because you have two letters here, you're going to have, you know, 4 combinations, 4 possibilities, all right? So look, I know that if I've got P is true and Q is true, if I look back to my table on page 99, I know that P and Q must be true. And by the way, I know that every other combination is going to be false, so I can fill in my table. Okay, so that was a simple one. Let me find another one here in the book. All right, let me make one up first. So how about I want to do not P and Q. Well, for my truth table, what I need to do is I need to make a P. I need to make a not P. I need to make a Q. And I need to make a not P and Q column. Okay? So, again, I'm going to do true, true, false, false. And for Q, it's going to be true, false, right? That's how we fill it in so we don't miss anything. Now, if I negate all of the P's here, I'm going to have false, false, true, true. What this conjunction wants me to do is take not P and Q and state what the truth value is, all right? So I know that a conjunction is only true if and only if both statements P and Q are true. So if I look at not P and Q, I've got false, true, so that's going to be a false. False, false, false. True, 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 false, false. Isn't that okay? Now I don't want to harp too much on this because you're not going to have to really make truth tables. You're going to have to fill in some simple ones. But I'm going to talk about this. I just wanted to give you a taste of it, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when I come back next week because I want to be there to see the expressions on your face, to assess your work while I'm there, to make sure you're filling in the truth table correctly. All right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to move to 2.3, which is conditional statements, and that begins on page 105. So let me move my paper here. All right, so we've got conditional statements. So we have statements, which are sentences that can be either deemed true or false. We have compound statements, which contains the word and or. And now we're going to talk about conditional statements. So a conditional statement is a statement that can be written in if-then form. What does that mean? Here's an example. If I am sick, then I expect to get better. Okay? I just made up a statement. It contains the word if. After the comma, there's the word then. Okay? Now, this is the important part. The part of this conditional statement, because it's an if-then form, so it's an if-then or conditional statement, right? The part after the word if is called the hypothesis. And the part of the statement after the word then is called the conclusion. And we usually denote the hypothesis with the letter P and the conclusion with the letter Q. All right? And rather than having some kind of a, it doesn't contain the word and it doesn't contain the word or, what we do is, in this case here, I would say if P, then Q. All right, so we use a one-sided arrow to denote a conditional statement. Okay, if this happens, then that must happen. All right, and that's all you need to do for that. So, a lot of times on the semester exam or on my tests, you'd be asked to identify a statement and a conclusion. So, if it is cloudy, then it will rain. Now look, this may be true or not true. I don't know yet, and I don't care. Okay, maybe it will rain if it's cloudy. Sometimes it's cloudy and it doesn't rain. The idea is first of all, what kind of a statement is this? You would say this is a conditional statement. Why? Because it contains the words if and then, right? And then you would be asked, identify the hypothesis. Well, the hypothesis, let's see if I have another color marker here. The hypothesis comes after the word if, and we denote it with a P, and the conclusion comes after the word then, and we denote it with a Q. So we'd say P goes to Q, or if P, then Q. That's it. All right? That's all there is to that. Now, things can happen with conditional statements, all right? And they're called the inverse, the converse, and the contrapositive. So, this is really hard to do from home, I think. I mean, I don't know. So let's suppose we have the statement P goes to Q. I know in my mind that this statement right here says if P, then Q, right? If something happens, then this happens, right? I know this. So, there's something called the converse of the statement. And to find the converse, all you're going to do is you're going to swap the hypothesis and the conclusion. All right, so I'm going to use this example up here. If it is cloudy, then it will rain, okay, as my P goes to Q. So in words, well, let me say this first. In symbols, I would swap this thing, and I'd say Q goes to P. And in words, I would write, if it will rain, then it is cloudy. Make sense? So the converse of an original statement just means that we swap the hypothesis and the conclusion. We just swap them and we write it symbolically like that, meaning conclusion goes to hypothesis. Okay? Then there's the inverse. And the inverse, the P and the Q stay in the same place, but you negate both of them. So if we start out like this, P goes to Q, our original, then the inverse of this would be not P goes to not Q. Okay, so in words, I would say if it is not cloudy, then it will not rain. Okay, and then finally there's a big fancy word called the contrapositive. And by the way, I often write it like this, contra plus sign because contrapositive, sometimes you've got to write that word a lot and it's a pain, so just contra plus means contrapositive. And the contrapositive is the inverse of the converse, or you could say the converse of the inverse. Doesn't matter which one you do first. So if I'm using this example, my P goes to Q, I can swap the conclusion and the hypothesis first and then negate it, or I could negate them first and then swap the conclusion and the hypothesis. So the contrapositive looks like this. If we start off with P goes to Q, then the contrapositive is tilde Q goes to tilde P. Okay, you swap the hypothesis and the conclusion and you negate them. That's only for the contrapositive. So once again, the converse, all we're doing is swapping the hypothesis with the conclusion. So we're going from here, from here to here. The inverse, we're leaving the P and the Q in the same position, but we're negating them, or we're adding the word not, right? And for the contrapositive, we're swapping the conclusion and hypothesis and we're negating it. So whether you want to take the inverse first and then take the converse, or take the converse first and then take the inverse, that doesn't matter. Okay, you'll get the same result. So let's see if I can find an example that's pretty quick in the book. Okay, so here's one that's a little mathematical. This is a funny one. If pigs can fly, then 2 plus 5 equals to 7. Okay? It's an if-then statement. Okay? This is my hypothesis, which I'm going to call P. This is my conclusion. I'm going to call that Q. And symbolically, I know it looks like this, even though it seems like a very silly thing. This is number 15 on page 109 of your book. Okay, so if pigs can fly, then 2 plus 5 is equal to 7. Well, what if I asked you to write the inverse? Well, we know the inverse is tilde P goes to tilde Q. How would we write that in words? If 2 plus 5 equals 7, if 2 plus 5 does not equal 7, sorry. Oh goodness. All right. Where's my whiteout here? Yikes. Okay. My bad. All right. If pigs cannot fly, then 2 plus 5 does not equal 7, right? That's the inverse. That's in words and symbolically. I also know the converse means Q goes to P, right? So how would I write that in words? If 2 plus 5 equals to 7, then pigs can fly. And then the contrapositive, well, that's tilde Q goes to tilde P, right? So tilde Q goes to tilde P, I would just, so this is why I often like to take the converse first, but again, you know, you can do it any way you want, whatever you're comfortable with. I've already got it in Q to P form, so now all I have to do is add the word not in each part, right? So if 2 plus 5 does not equal 7, then pigs cannot fly. Is that all right? So what you're going to do for today is the following. You're going to go to page 109 in the book. Right? So page 109. I'm trying to write big for this camera thing. And you're going to do the following. So pretty much you're going to identify hypotheses, conclusions. You're going to write a statement in if-then form, which may seem kind of weird. And I'll do an example in a second. I'm trying to keep the videos short because the longer they are, the longer it takes to upload. All right, so you're going to do 1 through 9 odd. Okay? And you know, suppose it says cheese contains calcium. So they're going to give you a statement like this. Cheese contains calcium. And they're going to ask you to put it in if-then form. And you're going to think, that's kind of hard. Some of those are kind of difficult to like do that with. So, I don't know. Maybe you could say something along the lines of, if it is cheese, then it contains calcium. If a food is cheese, then it contains calcium. So you can add words in there to help you out a little bit with that. All right, so just keep that in mind, that some of those where they give you a little kind of condensed form like this, and they're going to ask you to put it in if-then form, may be a little bit difficult to try and formulate. So just do the very best you can, and we'll talk about that next week when I see you, hopefully on Monday. Okay? So that's all for today. I hope you have a great day. Be good for your substitute. Do all your work. Review your other work. And I will see you next week. Bye.